So good morning and welcome to these 3 days of Biodiversa Plus Montpellier events. So welcome in France, in Montpellier. We are very happy with Baptiste to start with the capacity building workshop on the Convention on Biological Diversity, what we will now call CBD, and other multilateral environmental agreements, what we will now call MEAs. Baptiste Albisson there and I will, we organized this workshop and we will facilitate it during the next 2.5 hours. So thank you very much for being here. And we are both working at the French Ministry for Environment in France, and we are leading the Biodiversa Plus work stream on the collaboration with CBD and other MEAs. So first, Dr. Rob Hendriks from Biodiversa Plus will provide a short introduction to the workshop. So Rob is policy advisor at the Dutch Ministry for Agriculture, Fisheries, Food Security and Nature. He's co-leading the Biodiversa Plus work package on the internationalization of research. So he's very much involved also in CBD because he's the Dutch national focal point for the clearinghouse mechanism, what we will now call CHM. And he's also a member of the Dutch delegations to the CBD for more than 15 years. So thank you very much, Rob, for introducing, and the floor is now yours.
So, good morning on my behalf as well to all. I don't need to introduce myself further, and what is internationalization in Biodiversa Plus's perspective, I will come back to that in the slides as well. So, my introduction is along the lines of two main questions. The first one, is dissemination in the policy realm a key aspect of Biodiversa Plus? And asking the question, is answering it, obviously, and the answer will be a big, convincing yes. And that leads me to the objectives of this workshop, because that is very much on connecting to the policy realm and the CBD specifically in this case. So I will be addressing this room mainly in the sense of you being all representatives of the projects of the MBS call that is going to start over these days. And the first objective of this morning's workshop is to understand the CBD and other MEAs, and to know how they are addressing nature-based solutions already at this point, and more specifically to know how to get involved in the scientific, between parentheses, processes of the CBD, so that you, being the experts and researchers, can know how to connect to it. And then the third objective of this morning's session, but also over the next days, I guess, is to identify projects from us to you and you amongst yourselves that are interested in engaging further with the CBD and its work streams and activities, and how to support you with that from our perspective of Biodiversa Plus. So one slide reminding all of us on the transnational nature of Biodiversa Plus as a partnership with a lot of countries, mainly focusing on Europe, but also beyond, and with research actors and policy actors involved, and 83 partners in total by now. The main aim of Biodiversa Plus in terms of having and generating impact is through the transnational added value of the research projects. You all represent consortia from different backgrounds, from different countries, and that is also reflected in this call, We do have, I was told, 11 non-European partners involved in all the projects, and also the study sites are spread all over the world, among 6 continents, in fact. You may or may not know that this activity in terms of work packages and tasks is not that relevant to you perhaps, but it is within the construction of how Biodiversa is run. It is one work package on internationalization, as reminded already in the introduction of myself, and a specific task. But we work to reinforce the collaboration with the CBD through a cost-cutting approach. So all the other elements in this circle and also in the bar is being engaged. And then finally, another question: what are the links between CBD and Biodiversa Plus? There is a history already in the predecessor of CBD, Biodiversa. There were several activities by funded projects related to CBD and its steps in terms of the CBD process. And also in the current phase of Biodiversa Plus, this has been broadened, widened, made more strategically, and to the level of having activities like we are having today, really connecting to the CBD decisions, including a focus on nature-based solutions. And with that, I will end. Thank you very much for being here. I wish you all a fruitful workshop this morning, and I now hand back to Charlotte for the rest of the program. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rob, for this introduction, recalling the context of this capacity building workshop and showcasing the relevance of MEAs, including CBD, for Biodiversa Plus and its funded projects, especially under BiodivNBS Co. So the workshop will now be introduced by one of the end users of the CBD MEAs science policy interface, namely the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So this will be done by Dr. Tristan Tyrrell. He's the program manager officer on climate change in the Secretariat on Biological Diversity. And he's the person responsible for NBS in the Secretariat. He's based in Montreal, Canada, and local hour is 3:30 a.m. So we decided to record this intervention. So thank you very much. And now the floor is remotely to Mr. Tyrrell.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tristan Tyrrell. I am the Programme Officer responsible for biodiversity, climate change, and dry and subhumid lands at the CBD Secretariat. My apologies that I couldn't be with you in person, but I hope that this presentation will at least suffice somewhat, and my contact details are at the end, so please do reach out. I've been asked to speak a bit about the link between science and the work of the convention, as well as some of the more recent experiences with nature-based solutions and how it relates to the current Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and recent decisions from CBD COP16. So science has been very central in terms of the work of the convention, and it has formed the backbone to a lot of the decisions that have been taken down through the years. Although the balance between, shall we say, science and politics has fluctuated over time, our SUBSTA, the subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological matters or affairs, has been replaced to a certain extent with the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, in the same way that IPCC has under UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. But that's not to say that the contribution of science within the work of and the negotiations under the convention itself does not also exist. But there's been an increasing reliance on these external science policy contributions through the likes of IPBES, as well as IPCC to a certain extent and others. As a party-driven process, perhaps the engagements in the final decisions being taken under the CBD have less of a contribution of the scientists themselves, but that's why it's important for the scientific community to be engaging with negotiators, with others within this process right throughout the full intersessional period, as well as at the meetings themselves. There is a strong relationship between the Convention on Biological Diversity and the other multilateral environmental agreements, not least the other two Rio conventions, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and UN Convention to Combat Desertification, as well as the broader biodiversity-related MEAs, such as the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, CITES on trade, CMS for migratory species, etc. And the link between them and the contributions in terms of both policy guidance and hopefully a sort of coherent action and implementation, but also the need to foster stronger science policy links across all of the conventions, given that some are perhaps more specific for certain issues, whereas, for instance, the Convention on Biological Diversity can be quite broad in its approach.
Well, so we would like to thank Mr. Tyrrell for this remote introduction, and we will have the opportunity to learn more about the way NBS are addressed in the CBD context in the second part of this workshop. After this brief introduction from the CBD Secretariat, let me give the floor to Dr. Pierre Spielewoy from the French National Museum of Natural History. Mr. Spielewoy is program manager on the capacity building on CBD as part of the EU-funded COP for CBD project running until 2027. Pierre is also well experienced in the CBD as he completed his PhD in 2024 about the convention and the way it integrates indigenous and local knowledge systems. The floor is yours, Pierre, for an introduction to the functioning and processes of the CBD, laying the foundations for our reflection on how to get involved in such international process.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all of you. I'm very happy to be able to give you a short introduction of the CBD on its processes. So I've been told that I have only 15 minutes. It's quite a simple subject to present in 15 minutes. So I will go for it without more delay. First of all, some key facts about the CBD. So I forgot to ask, some of you are already familiar with the CBD process? Yeah, so, okay. So you can don't hesitate to add some information afterwards if I forgot something. So the CBD Convention on Biological Diversity was open for signature on June 5th, 1992. So it was in fact during the third Earth Summit in Rio. And it entered into force on December 23rd, 1993, so a year after. So you may know that the process to be a convention to be able to enter into force need a certain amount of countries, signatories, to be able to exist legally. So the convention involved 196 parties, so it's quite a lot. And we need to notice here that the OLEC and the USA are not parties. So That's a good news for the USA, so they cannot go back on their involvement in this convention. So CBD is part of the Rio Convention. So a whole package adopted, as I was telling you, during the third, not the second, the third Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio, with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. So usually we know a bit more about the Convention on Climate Change. Why? Well, it's about involvement of the countries on maybe mediatization of this convention. Maybe it's easier to speak about CO2 than to speak about biodiversity. Biodiversity is quite big, and also it involves other kind of policies more directly linked with territorial management, territorial sovereignty, and that's quite a difficult topic. So why specifically did we need a biodiversity convention? So actually you might already know that some convention already existed before the CBD about some issues related to biodiversity, but it was more linked to specific issues like species management, like lands management, and the conservationist NGOs were calling about a global framework to take into account all of this level of diversity, biological diversity. It involves the ecosystem levels, it involves the species level, but also the genetic level. At this time also, biological diversity was severely declining, unfortunately, and so there was quite a mobilization by the civil society. So that for sure helps the parties to adopt this convention. And also, it was the time of some very important development with genetic technologies. So that's also part of the context of the adoption of the CBD. What is quite interesting and important to see inside the convention is the mention of an intrinsic value to nature. So that's due to some advocating by the civil society and also some indigenous representative. The use of the term of biological diversity is first written in an international agreement and also defined, including the genetic level. This convention also recognizes the importance of indigenous knowledge, so that's quite an important fact too. And the convention established a fair and equitable mechanism for the use of genetic diversity and biotechnology. So it was the first time. You need not to forget that the CBD is a framework, or what we call in international law an umbrella convention. So that means that the obligations set out inside the convention are not very specific. It's more general obligation, general objective, and it leaves it up to the parties to decide what needs to be implemented effectively. So that's why also we need a strategic framework to define very specific goals, target, to be able to implement this obligation effectively. Three main objectives inside this convention: the conservation of biological diversity, the sustainable use of its component, and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. So we can speak about that during hours. It's very interesting to analyze each of these concepts. So just to quickly to point out the fact that conservation and sustainable use are both in here. And it's because you had some opposing interest during the negotiation of the convention. So conservation of biological diversity is more linked to conservationist NGOs. Sustainable use, it was more coming from the private sectors on the country as well, and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits. It's linked with with the huge mobilization of the southern countries, because actually the conservationists on northern country were defending the free access of genetic resources. But as you may know, genetic resources are mainly based on southern country. And southern country were like, no, we will not allow that. And maybe it's a way also to found some conservation policies. So that was, at the end, a sort of a consensus to put that this way. And it has led to the adoption of some additional protocol. So the most important is the Nagoya Protocol. So, as I was mentioning before, to make the objective of the convention operational, you need some strategic framework. First one was adopted at COP6 at The Hague. It was quite a general strategic framework. It was not as developed as the one we have now. The second one in 2011, during the COP10 in Nagoya. You may have heard about that. So we usually called it the Aichi biodiversity targets. It was quite complete, quite well defined, but as you may have heard about that, it was the objective and the targets were not completely matched afterwards. So what one of the main challenge of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is also to improve the implementation process, improve the evaluation process within the goals and the targets definition. The CBD bodies, very quickly, the most important one is the Conference of Parties. So it's pretty much the same as the other convention. It's the decision-making body. You have also other type of body. The subsidiary, mostly is subsidiary bodies. So subsidiary body for scientific, technical, and technological advice, subsidiary body on implementation, and quite new, the subsidiary body on Article AG. Yeah. So Article AG is an article about the traditional knowledge on the need to take into account into conservation policies. You have also other kind of bodies like a working group, ad hoc technical expert group that are more circumstantial, but the most important one are the four first of them. So basically, CBD process looks like that. It's very simple way to present it, but of course you have first the parties and observer that have the power to decide. The decisions are taken during the COP, and before the COP, after the COP, you have a whole process of coordinated by the Secretariat to be able to inform the decision that will be taken during the COP. So the subsidiary bodies are involved, some expert group also are involved to inform, generally speaking, the subsidiary bodies on you could have also other activities, other MEAs also can participate to this big process, but at the end, the decision making is handled by the COP. So you have several actors, the parties, of course, but also the observer. So University and scientific communities, usually we are considered as observer. We could also be part of national delegation, and it would make us parties, but usually we are in the side with other major groups like indigenous and local communities, companies, parliamentarian, local authorities, youth, and women. That's the major group that were identified by the Convention on Biological Diversity. Very quickly, the scientific process mechanism is mainly handled by the subsidiary body for scientific and technical and technological advice. This subsidiary body has 5 main objectives: provide scientific and technical assessment, prepare scientific and technical assessment of the effect of type of measure taken, identify innovative, efficient, and state-of-the-art technologies, provide advice on scientific programs on international relations, respond to scientific, technical, technological, and methodological questions. So, as you can see, the CBD is a science-based political process. We want to make the CBD science-based, but there is some tool for helping this science-based process. Very quickly, I think I will pass these slides because it's example of other type of scientific processes, but Charlotte will elaborate a bit more about that later on. So that's a way to present the involvement of scientific and expert inside the CBD process. Main goal is to identify and share knowledge. So at the beginning of the process, for example, through the substar, to inform the decision-making process afterwards in the COP, but also it could be at the end of the process to participate to the policies assessment after the decisions are made and started to be implemented. Also quite important to mention that scientists and experts are also involved in the technical and scientific cooperation. So that's quite an important part of the CBD process. To help other countries to improve, for example, on biotechnology, etc., etc. You may ask, what's the difference between the substar and the IPBS? You can see that there are some roles that are matching, and actually the CBD has identified the problematic. So, of course, there are some similar duties, but the idea is to make a cooperation happen between the two processes. CBD and IPBS are independent processes. IPBS also serve other MEAs. CBD scope could propose subject for assessment to IPBS, would decide afterwards which assessment will be undertaken, but CBD, for example, substar, also considers outcomes of IPBS assessment through its permanent mandate. So you have a constant dialogue and information about between IPBS and the CBD. So that's partly what is written on this screen. So I will end my presentation here, not to be too late, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for this introduction to the CBD. So, as you mentioned, it lays the foundations for getting involved, as understanding is the basic before. So, I will now present how to get involved in these scientific processes, mentioning that scientific processes are very much political sometimes in the CBD context, so as a disclaimer. From CBD to other global MEAs, so for now we are focusing our interventions on CBD, but what we say also applies to other MEAs. So we are focusing on MEAs, which are different, for example, from the UNEA, from IUCN, from IPBS, etc. They cannot be considered as MEAs. And we are also focusing in this workshop on global MEAs, but you also have regional ones that might be interesting for your projects. So as mentioned, CBD is the overarching agreement on biodiversity. It is very comprehensive and it is very successful in terms of membership because, as Pierre mentioned, you have almost 200 parties, so almost all countries are parties to the CBD. But it is not the sole MEA addressing NBS, whether in an implicit or explicit way. So Daniela Rizzi from ICLEI will tell us more about other MEAs. So regarding NBS, they are addressed in different frameworks. First, you have what we call the biodiversity cluster, which is a cluster of biodiversity-related conventions. So you have CBD in there, but also the Convention on Migratory Species, CMS, also the World Heritage Convention, WHC, as well as the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. Besides these biodiversity-related conventions, NBS can also be addressed in Rio Conventions, working, for example, on climate change and desertification. And besides the environmental realm, NBS and biodiversity can be integrated, what we call mainstreaming, in other sectors. And there you have what we call in the UN system the Environment Management Group, which is gathering, for example, FAO on agriculture, also WTO, on trade, BRS conventions as regards chemicals, or WHO, which is relevant for NBS as they are benefiting our health and well-being. So as mentioned, CBD functioning and processes were presented before, and we focused very much on CBD, but all the processes usually applies to other MEAs. So what we are presenting also applies to other. For example, as Pierre mentioned, you have the main source of scientific guidance in CBD, which is called the SEPSTA, the Subsidiary Body on Scientific Affairs, and other source of scientific guidance, which is external, is IPBS. But for CMS, for all the conventions on the slide, you have their body and also other sources. So you can see the slide after the workshop if you're interested in engaging in other MEAs. So the question before how getting involved is probably why getting involved as researchers. So what to expect and first and foremost what not to expect. So you will have the opportunity to hear Dr. Christina Hvilsom from the Copenhagen Zoo, and she will explain why it is rewarding and sometimes challenging to engage with CBD and other MEAs. And you can also see a video that we recorded 2 years ago of Dr. Christopher Raymond, and he also gave a testimony about the engagement in CBD as a researcher. And for example, on the slide you can see the benefits of working, and he also addressed challenges. So how getting involved now after the question why? So as a preliminary remark, all knowledge systems, all scientific disciplines and all levels of experience are required. So we need everyone on board for CBD engagement. and it is also possible to engage over your project lifetime, whether it was planned at an early stage in your proposal or not. And the engagement with an MEA is usually supporting others, because there is what we call a circulation of norms between the MEAs. So sometimes you're engaging with CMS and then it has influence on CBD. And this engagement can be done at different levels. So first at the international level, on what we call a direct manner. So you get engaged as BiodivNBS project directly in CBD processes, like official ones. But you also have the possibility to engage in an indirect manner, for example, through IPBS, IUCN, so initiatives and other brokers, and also at regional level as regards the implementation of the CBD. We are working on this in Biodiversa Plus, and we are trying to showcase a continuum of engagement from beginners to experts, because as mentioned, we need to have everyone on board, and your involvement very much depends on your willingness to engage, but also, let's be clear, on the resources and the opportunities. So I will now present ways to get involved very quickly, because the schedule is quite tight as a beginner, as an advanced, and as an expert, but you will have the opportunity to see the slides after the workshop and to know more. And some skills are prerequisites in this engagement, and we would be happy to know if some of you are interested in later capacity building. For example, engaging a CBD sometimes requires the ability to read a CBD decision. It looks easy, but it isn't as a researcher, so we can provide you with some capacity building if needed. So for beginners, so for projects that aren't very familiar with CBD, there is no prerequisite, and low resources are required. So the objective would be to get to know CBD more. So you can first discover its strategic documents and the convention's scope in general. So that's the first step. You can also learn how to read CBD documents. You can get to know the convention's program of work, and you can also check CBD notifications. So on the right, you have resources to do so, like how to do it concretely. So please see the slides after the workshop, because we don't have time, unfortunately, to enter into details. Other beginner involvement can be to discover the clearinghouse mechanism mentioned before. Also make oneself known to the national focal points, so the people working at the national level on the implementation of the CBD, and also network with other researchers and initiatives that are already involved in CBD, because learning from peers is crucial in that regard. For advanced people, the idea would be to understand, so the prerequisite would be having an understanding of CBD and actors, and it requires moderate resources, but not low resources. So the objective would be to do what we call CBD sensitive research, so research that can have some uptake in the CBD context, take part in existing processes, as well as support the implementation of the convention. So you can generate knowledge and or data relevant to CBD. You can respond to consultations. You can attend meetings, and you can also attend non-official meetings addressing CBD issues. Regarding the implementation, it is crucial to mention that you can engage with the Secretariat of the Convention, but also with people involved in the implementation of the Convention at regional, national level, also local level. So you can get involved in the NBSAP, so the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, also in National Scientific Committee, become a member of an advisory body. And what we would like to stress is that once you're familiar with the CBD, you're advanced, you can build capacities in your own communities to spread the word and build capacities. And last but not least, for experts, the prerequisites are having experience with CBD and actors, and it requires relatively high resources. So the objective would be to collaborate and influence the agenda, so to be more proactive than just taking part in existing processes. So you can publish scientific articles targeting CBD. This was, for example, the case for the design of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So this was very much influenced by proactive researchers trying, for example, to integrate climate change in the framework. So you have an example of an article. It is sometimes difficult to track the impact of such efforts, but they are interesting. You can also provide relevant inputs to the Secretariat. You can develop the documents to inform. You can become a member of a working group, so as mentioned by Pierre before. You can also organize side events, create scientific networks on some contentious issues, engage with organizations linked to CBD, and develop research projects that have end users in your partners. So this is very well advanced. So this slide is more for experts or people willing to strongly engage. So I will now briefly focus on ENGEES. So ENGEES is, as mentioned, a key knowledge broker of CBD. So this is one of the main source of scientific guidance for the convention. So for example, the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework, was very much influenced by the first global assessment 2019, for instance, in the structure of the framework. And NBS were addressed in many ENGEES knowledge products, such as, for example, the first global assessment, as mentioned, but also the workshop reports on climate change and pandemics, also more recently the values assessment, and in December, the Nexus and Transformative Change Assessment. And you will have the opportunity to contribute to CBD through ENGEES, through future assessments. So ongoing assessments are the one on spatial planning and ecological connectivity, the second global assessment, and maybe, but it is still unsure, an assessment on climate change, and nominations are not done yet, so maybe you will have the opportunity to contribute. And to finish this presentation, how to get involved in a very concrete way. So the idea would be to draft a dissemination strategy to CBD and MEAs. So we are currently developing such a tool in Biodiversa Plus, and we are proposing a stepwise approach along with a methodology and resources to ease your engagement with the CBD, because we know it is challenging and sometimes too challenging when you don't know CBD, etc. So this will be sent in the coming weeks, and you can complete the table or the form by June, and we can provide support afterwards. Thank you so much. And we will now open the floor to questions, if you have any, on the three presentations laying the foundations for engagement with CBD. Should you have any. Otherwise, you will have the opportunity to ask them afterwards.
Mine is not a question, it's just a praise. And I can say that because I'm not part of Biodiversa Plus, so it's fine to get a compliment from the outside. I'm Daniela Rizzi, I'm going to talk about the MEAs. Now, just to say that I'm coordinating a project called NetworkNature, which is the one-stop shop for NBS things coming from Horizon projects. And I must say, we don't do these links with the global processes as Biodiversa Plus is doing. And for me, it's like a huge learning effect to be here. And I'm very happy to know that you guys are really promoting this. So I just want to highlight how important it is to bring the research that Biodiversa Plus is doing to these processes to influence them. And really, like, big heart for you guys for doing this.
Yes, so my question is for Pierre. Do you think some CBD processes became too political at the expense of the scientific evidence? And if so, which scientific processes would you recommend Biodiversa Plus funded researchers to get engaged with?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think it's not the fact that it's started to become too political. It's at the end a political process because each parties are representing themselves, and usually it's the ministries that are involved in this kind of process. So they are trying to be as much as possible respecting their own interest. So that's for sure. That's one of the difficulty of the scientific process at this level. But it doesn't mean that scientists have not a place on a role to play, because it's always important to inform the decision-making process, give the key data, the key knowledge for that. And then we can imagine that if the decisions are not matching at all the basic knowledge we have on a specific subject, it could lead to some pressure by civil society or lead to another dialogue afterwards. So yeah, that's part of the process, on the internal constraint of the process. As far as the involvement of Biodiversity Plus scientists in this kind of process, I think Charlotte presented some ideas. So I think the most simple way is to be in touch with the national delegates and be able maybe to provide some knowledge, some information about some text that will be discussed during the CBD process, but also to participate, for example, to peer reviewing on some subject. So regularly the CBD is calling for peer reviewing. Also to participate to the IPBS process, because IPBS has the advantage to be more scientific than political. Of course, the political part is also here. It's more the summary for the decision maker, but you have clear scientific-based evidence that are providing through the IPBS process. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Okay, so thank you so much for this presentation on how to get involved within the CBD and these questions. We are now pleased to welcome Mr. Julien Pelet, PhD student from the National School of Water and Environmental Engineering of Strasbourg. With a background in ecological engineering, he gradually shifted toward political science and sociology to critically examine how environmental issues are governed. He will provide us some key information in the NBS concept in the international landscape.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the space to present a few things I'm going to take about my PhD. So, as I was preparing my presentation, I was telling myself I'm going to speak with scientists that are going to be involved in these CBD processes. So what were the key results of my PhD that I could maybe identify and tell you about. So, first of all, my perspective is a sociological, political science perspective. So it's one that is mostly as an observer of these processes. And I have identified 2 points that I will say are points of vigilance about the political factors that influence the take-up of knowledge into these multilateral environmental agreements. And the first one is that the way the scientific or expert knowledge is presented, we could say the narrative around the scientific knowledge greatly influences the way that this knowledge is then taken up by political actors. And the other one is that scientific or expert knowledge is also subjected to strategic use by states that use it to defend certain type of position. And then I'm going to develop these 2 points in my presentation. So just to come back really quickly on the history of the NBS concept, because this is what I study in my PhD, we can identify 4 different phases. And what I'm going to show is that all these different phases are accompanied with a different framings of the NBS concept. So the first phase of the development of NBS at the international level takes place between 2008 and 2011. So the term was first identified in a World Bank report, but was not really defined at the time. And it was taken up by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, really by actors from a program which is the Forest and Climate Program. And these actors that were involved in climate negotiations really tried to make at the time to better integrate biodiversity issues into these negotiations. Since, as the interview extract shows there, at the time, topics like restoration were not really well addressed at this point. So the first way the concept was framed is to make it as a tool for mainstreaming biodiversity in climate policies. The next sequence is a sequence where NBS were more broadly integrated into the IUCN agenda. So it was integrated into the 2013 and 16 program to make 1/3 of the program. And at this time, the NBS concept was reframed. A definition was produced in 2016. And now NBS was more presented as a concept to favor the mainstreaming of biodiversity in climate policies, but not only in climate policies, in other sectoral policies like health, for instance. And also at this time, the concept was translated from political policy to science. And the rationale behind it was to say that there exist many different concepts like ecological restoration, disaster, eco-DRR, that exist into several sectoral policies. And they all have several principles, and the goal of the NBS concept would be to be an umbrella concept that will try to integrate all of these different concepts that exist in individual sectoral policies. So. And the next, what I'm going to say about these 2 first phases is that the circulation of the NBS concept at the time was quite confidential, not really mainstream. But around 2019, 2020, there was a big hype around this NBS concept when it was reframed due to an article that was published by scientists from TNC as a global solution to achieve net zero. So it was an article called Natural Climate Solutions that was published in 2017. And at the time, these scientists produced a statement that natural climate solutions, then they were also reframed as nature-based solutions, could provide around 30% or 37% of the cost-effective mitigation by 2013. And this statement was really well, circled very well, was taken up by many different actors. It was taken up, for instance, by Georges Monbiot and yes, that they made a campaign around this concept at the time. It was also cited into the EBES 2000 Global Assessment Report. And this shows that, a point addressed by Felix Schmidt and his colleagues in an article, that knowledge diffusion is also subject to the logic of a market of attention. which means that when knowledge is framed into a sensational or extreme way, it's easier to be picked up by politicians, by other actors. And so this sparked also a big controversy around NBS at the time, because it was also taken up by private actors such as oil companies like Shell, to say that, yeah, we're going to implement NBS to achieve net zero at the scale of our companies. But this was also criticized because several more critical NGOs said that it's also a way for these actors to greenwash and to avoid reducing their emissions. And this also led to controversies between the distinction of NBS and NCS concept at the time. So the last phase of the circulation of NBS concepts, it's because of this hype also, it got taken up by states or by parties of the CBD, like the European Union, and proposed to be integrated in, for instance, in the GBF. And what I wanted to address there is that we can see the impact of this framing around the global solution to achieve net zero, because it was really formulated like that in the first formulation of the target, that is now the target 8 about NBS and climate change into the GBF. And this changed a lot over time, also partly due to the expert knowledge that was produced in the substa. So we can see that there is a shift, and the objective of 30% really disappears across time, and adaptation issues get a greater prominence in the final version of the target. Yeah, and to illustrate also the strategic use that parties make of scientific knowledge, I've taken some extract of some submissions by parties into notifications, where they really take this knowledge about this study that was produced around NBS to defend different positions. So for instance, we have the EU that takes the 37% estimate to advocate for NBS integration. But you also have some other uses of knowledge that I think quite interesting. For instance, Brazil takes the result of an article produced by the NBS Initiative that say that there is also a lot of uncertainty about NBS for adaptation, and they have a really political use of these results about uncertainty, because they say we shouldn't integrate NBS into the agreement, into the GBF, because there is too much uncertainty. So it's really to defend the position of not integrated NBS into this agreement. And so, yeah, I would just like to come back on the few points I've raised earlier as my conclusion.
Thank you very much, Julien, for this very insightful presentation. I think it's very enlightening to see the strategic aspects behind the CBD and its negotiations. Do you have some questions for Julien as regards the very controversial policy landscape surrounding NBS at the international level?
Sorry, I didn't say my name earlier. So I'm Tiffen, I'm part of Biodiversa Plus. And my question, so thank you for your very interesting presentation. My question is regarding the difference between NBS and EBA. Mm-hmm. So why is this?
So, it's an approach, but yeah, EBA, there's also something that we need to mention, because there's ecosystem-based adaptation, but there's also a concept which is ecosystem-based approaches that has been recognized in the CBD context. And there has been, about the difference between ecosystem-based approaches and NBS, a huge controversy in the frame of the CBD, because yeah, many actors say that this term also exists. Why do we need a new term like NBS? And but as actors like the IUCN say, NBS is supposed to be a broader umbrella concept. So ecosystem-based adaptation and ecosystem approaches also are part of the umbrella.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm Julia Pelet. I'm working with Biodiversa Plus and a bit engaging in this level. And thank you very much for this presentation, which was very interesting on the controversies as well of the concept. You mentioned a bit the role of the CBD knowledge synthesis and the technical series that fits the convention's decision. And would you recommend that the projects also could focus on this to engage with? Or
I don't know the details of how they could engage, but I think this is something that is really used afterwards by the parties negotiating the decisions to reframe. So I think it's maybe a channel that is really important also as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Julien. Yeah, you can answer questions after the workshop if some are arising afterwards. After these three presentations on the CBD, their relevant scientific processes, as well as the international landscape on NBS, which is very controversial, we will now enter the second phase of the workshop, and we will learn more about the way NBS are currently addressed and will be addressed in the next few years within the CBD context, but also in the other MEAs context. And this part will provide you maybe opportunities to get engaged with the CBD in the next few years. So we will have the opportunity to hear again Tristan Tyrrell from the Secretariat on Biological Diversity, and he will explain how NBS are introduced and addressed in the CBD.
So we now have the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and maybe I'll switch to my presentation then at this point to speak a little bit more about that. But under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which was adopted just over 2 years ago now at COP15 here in Montreal. They lay out the approach that the convention as a whole is taking in terms of trying to address the loss of biodiversity, as well as thinking about and trying to position nature and biodiversity in the context of our collective well-being, whether it's health or economic or cultural and social, whatever it may be. So the mission is to put nature on a path to recovery by 2030 with a longer-term vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. And the framework itself is divided under 4 goals with 23 action-oriented targets. The 4 goals are, the first 3 are linked to the main pillars of the convention, so conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use, and access and benefit sharing to genetic resources arising from biodiversity. And then goal D is more on the means of implementation, so resource mobilization, capacity building, etc. The targets themselves, 23 to be achieved by 2030. And these are where most of the parties, the countries, the governments, as well as other actors, other implementers, will be focusing their attention. And then there are other elements to it, including monitoring and reporting, communications and outreach, etc. Cross-cutting considerations, though, I'll come back to the targets in a second. These are sort of guiding principles for the implementation of the framework as a whole. And so this is just some of the ones that have been highlighted, including different values, recognizing the different value systems, that people will look at nature and understand and appreciate nature for different reasons, and to respect those and to work with those. Human rights-based approach, which is new as a sort of a central pillar for the convention, as well as the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. There's also gender equality and intergenerational equity are central, but also, finally, the whole of government and whole of society approach, meaning that it's no longer the remit solely of the small biodiversity office buried in bowels of a Ministry of Environment somewhere, but actually that there needs to be cross-sectoral engagement and inter-level engagement, I suppose, throughout at a national level, at an international level, but also certainly at a subnational level. So thinking about who needs to be responsible for what. And then linked to that is to all of this is the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the role of the other conventions, either the Rio Conventions or the other biodiversity related MEAs. So just to go back to the targets, these are specifically the ones that are related to climate change. Targets 8 and 11 speak to climate change directly. They're also the two that highlight nature-based solutions and or ecosystem-based approaches, as it has been phrased through the convention. Some recent decisions that happened at COP16, the 16th meeting of the COP in Cali, Colombia, at the end of October last year. And then it was the session was then resumed at the end of February in Rome. And so I'm talking about the decisions that were taken collectively. The monitoring framework was finally adopted for the GBF. And it's available there. Nature-based solutions itself, there's only one indicator that actually refers to nature-based solutions, and it's one of the responses to this binary question. So for any of the targets that did not have a clear indicator, or a part of the target that did not have a clear indicator available, the one that would actually show trends over time, the option was taken to use binary indicators, essentially yes, no, although it's now a sort of yes, but, no, etc. So it's not quite binary anymore, but they're still called binary questions. One of them was about policies or action plans relating to climate change, and one of the options within for the responses was nature-based solutions. Otherwise, the indicators themselves are fairly high level, but climate change related indicators seem to be a particularly difficult area to cover. One of the main decisions that did come out of Cali was specifically on biodiversity and climate change, which was positive, considering at COP15 parties failed to reach an agreement relating to biodiversity and climate change. So the decision itself was essentially there wasn't one. But at COP16, decision 1622 was a strong decision focusing on the nexus between biodiversity and climate change. And there were a number of elements within it, including the need to promote synergies, both for parties themselves, but also for the work of the Secretariat, and the need for engagement with across the various either institutions or processes. And although there was no specific request for engagement with the scientific community, with the academic community, there are a number of areas where there needs to be there are opportunities, I should say, for engagement, and I'll talk about one or two of them now in a second. But certainly, I think I would suggest that people should not feel shy about reaching out to your national focal points. And also, if within your agencies that you are accredited to the CBD, to reach out to whoever is on the mailing list, to identify opportunities for engagement with the CBD for under various thematic areas. There are a couple of processes underway for biodiversity and climate change that I'll talk about in a second, but there are certainly others related that have a nature-based solutions related element, even if that particular phrase, nature-based solutions, is not necessarily being used. So, for instance, for invasive alien species, there's a process underway with an online forum. There are other things relating to biodiversity and health and capacity building, and a number of options and areas of work that might be of interest. One of the requests that did come out of the climate change decision 1622 is a request to provide a supplement to those voluntary guidelines that I mentioned earlier on ecosystem-based adaptation and disaster risk reduction, with the intention of also bringing in mitigation, as well as trying to put adaptation disaster risk reduction in the context of nature-based solutions and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, both of which have emerged more in terms of the discourse within the convention. Obviously, the framework itself was only adopted 2 years ago, but even when the original voluntary guidelines were adopted, nature-based solutions itself was not a sort of a fully agreed or recognized term under the convention. There was no discussion within any of the decisions back at COP14. And actually, nature-based solutions was one of the reasons why that biodiversity and climate change decision was not adopted at COP15, because of diverging opinions about nature-based solutions at that point. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it seems that over time that some of those concerns have dissipated somewhat, but that's not to say that they are gone entirely. Other elements then within this supplement include social environmental safeguards, in particular relating to mitigation as well as nature-based solutions, and also recognition of Mother Earth-centric actions. As I mentioned, the process is already underway now for this, and so on the 7th to 9th of May of this year in Cambridge, UK, there will be a hybrid workshop for developing the content, or really digging deep into the content of the supplement. The nomination process has closed. It closed on the 24th of March, but you can reach out to me via my email, which will be at the end of this presentation, if you feel that you would like to attend. I cannot promise anything, but there might be space to participate online at that point. Just a few things to say in terms of engagement. So we will have our next SUBSTA meeting, this subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological affairs meeting in October in Panama City. And biodiversity and climate change is on the agenda for that meeting, so you may wish to consider participation. It will be followed by the first meeting of the new subsidiary body on Article 8J, which is the engagement with Indigenous peoples and local communities. And again, that need to for a sort of a multiple evidence-based approaches as they take with IPBES, recognizing the multiple forms of knowledge and working with and being mutually supportive is very important. So that might be of interest. In terms of engagement, so as I mentioned, there are notifications that go out calling for inputs, including the one that's currently out for biodiversity, climate change, and drylands on the enhanced policy coherence. Obviously, that policy does need to be supported by good science, etc. So there certainly would be an opportunity for the scientific community to contribute to that process. But more broadly, engagement at the SUBSTA or SBI, the subsidiary body on implementation, the COPs itself. The next COP will be probably in October next year, certainly in the autumn of next year, 2026, in Yerevan in Armenia, and engaging in those certainly through the green zone, but also through side events, as well as the opportunity to meet face-to-face with national focal points and other negotiators would be very important. I will leave it at that. My contact details are there on the screen, as well as the various links to the social media accounts, which can also be quite good. But also to think about making sure that your agency national focal point or your agency focal point is aware of your interest in the work of the convention. And if you're not already accredited to the CBD, to think about becoming accredited. And if you have any questions around that, please reach out to me at my email address there. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, many thanks again to Mr. Tyrrell for his remote intervention and his interest in the Biodiversa Plus workshop. I think it is really a privilege to have someone from the Secretariat explaining how science is important for the CBD work and how to get engaged. So thank you so much. So to make this intervention a bit more interactive, as he attended remotely, we prepared some questions to Mr. Tyrrell, and we hope that these would be relevant for you. So our questions were, where and when to find information enabling the engagement of scientists within the CBD, so how to concretely get engaged and how to know how to do it. Another question from us was about the network. So who are the main scientific actors working with the Secretariat? So how to engage through certain initiatives that work closely with the Secretariat. And our third question was, would you recommend researchers to get engaged with the Secretariat itself or with parties that are supposed to implement the CBD? Because in the CBD context, you always have the two levels, engaging with the Secretariat and the convention, or with the parties and the people implementing the strategic plans, such as the Global Biodiversity Framework. So the floor is now to Mr. Tyrrell for the answers.
Thanks for that question. I think the main way really to engage is just to make sure that whatever scale that you're working at, so if you're working at a national level, that you are in liaising with your national focal point or whoever the agency is within the government that is responsible for the implementation of the convention, that they are aware that you exist and what you can contribute. And then hopefully vice versa, that you can be also benefiting from them as well. If you're working on multiple, maybe at a regional level or across multiple countries, to do the same for all the different countries that you're working in. And one of the things that's certainly appreciated is when countries are working collaboratively together. Recognizing that biodiversity is a common good, etc. It doesn't necessarily respect national boundaries, and so we try and encourage cooperation and collaboration at all levels where possible. In terms of the main scientific actors, so as I mentioned, the SBSTA is not quite so much the scientific body that maybe it used to be or is originally designed to be, and so it's largely IPBES has somewhat taken on that role. Or even maybe an even enhanced role, far more than maybe what SBSTA would have done. But in terms of providing that sort of scientific backstopping to a lot of the discussions and negotiations, the likes of IPBES as well as IPCC and the Science Policy Interface on the UNCC and others, they tend to provide a lot of that more direct scientific access or scientific knowledge. In terms of projects or various agencies, so the civil society sector is quite strong within the CBD, and you do have the likes of IUCN and WWF and Conservation International and some of these the bingos as such have all played a very big effort in pushing the convention forward under various or related to various activities or approaches. Not least, nature-based solutions itself has largely come from some of those organizations, they're so certainly engaging with them, but given that the convention is a party-driven process and it's the parties who ultimately take the decisions at the end, I would encourage you to reach out to those agencies, but equally to also reach out to those national focal points, to those government representatives. And in terms of researchers being engaged, absolutely any opportunity really to be part of that discussion and to be helping to push the ambition forward, and also perhaps to sort of help negotiators understand the requirements, the needs for both.
I think you will have the opportunity to hear the end of the response with the recording. Sorry for that. Tristan Tyrrell explained a lot of opportunities to get engaged with the CBD in the coming years. So do not hesitate to reach out to him as he proposed. So as he mentioned, NBS are on the agenda for a couple of COPs and will remain on the agenda. So do not hesitate to reach out to him, because opportunities will come until 2028 and the end of the BiodivNBS project, so stay tuned. So now we have been focusing on CBD so far, but as mentioned, processes also exist in what we call other MEAs, so other multilateral environmental agreements. So let me now introduce Mrs. Daniela Rizzi from ECLI Europe. ECLI is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives based in Germany. She's a senior expert on NBS and biodiversity. Daniela is very much involved in research on nature-based solutions as the coordinator of the EU-funded project NetworkNature, which is closely linked to the Biodiversa Plus Work Package 3 on NBS. She's also experienced in CBD as she contributed to a report on the integration of NBS in MEAs. So this is written on the slide. So the floor is yours for the introduction to the way other MEAs are addressing NBS in other sectors beyond the overarching CBD and the biological diversity lens.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, I'll get that. Yeah, thank you. So happy to be here. Just to mention, I'm a little bit outside my comfort zone because NetworkNature works a lot with policy, European policy, right? That's actually the work that we're doing. And the report that is there, what happened is that we did a screening, I think more than 50 policies in the from the European Commission, and try to understand the entry points for nature-based solutions. So the ones that are, going for NBS, the ones that are maybe blocking NBS, and then try to understand the gaps and inform the European Commission how to, step up the game on NBS. But I'm very happy to be here because, as I said, I think it's super important to connect the work we're doing in research in Europe to these international processes. The next, boop. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so this slide has been covered by Tyrrell, but just to mention that why we need to actually have these conversations with the global arena is because it's a way to bring, like the European Commission has been investing more than 850 million in research and innovation for nature-based solutions in all these different projects. And Biodiversa Plus is also putting a whole lot of money for research and innovation in this field. So I think that Europe has let's say, a big scientific base to share with the rest of the world, given also the whole respect that we have to have with indigenous communities and that are doing this for thousands and thousands of years, but they don't call it NBS, right? So multilateral environmental agreements, MEAs, it's very important to say that not all of them are binding. So some of them are, but they kind of like give this framework, and they span across many of arenas that are important for NBS. So biodiversity, of course, the heart of NBS, but also climate, land, oceans, although they are non-binding, they bring nature-based solutions to completely new, let's say, policy fields. So it's very important for us to also acknowledge them and not only focus on the CDB, which is an obvious one. And they can promote cooperation, they can set shared targets, right? And they can enable this conversation between national EU policies and global objectives. As I said, NetworkNature has been working a lot with frameworks like the EU Biodiversity Framework Strategy for 2030, the Nature Restoration Law, which is not a law, it's a regulation now, the Green Deal, and so we're working a lot in the European arena, but we did bring more than 12 projects to Cali from the Horizon projects last year. So we're trying to do these connections to the global arena as well. The ones that I want to mention here is the UNFCCC. Of course, as you know, let's say their lobby and their work is a lot heavier than the work that is being done for biodiversity. So the biodiversity agenda always arrives a little bit later to the party. And what we are trying to do is, of course, to have biodiversity being looked at eye level in relation to climate, and actually even the interlinkages. So I don't know if you signed it, but there was this huge letter that was signed by I don't know how many researchers around the world to make sure that these two COPs are actually integrated. And Brazil now with COP30 in October really wants to bring that closer. And of course, UNCCD. So this is very important in terms of desertification and what happens to land, and also the wetlands, one Ramsar. Uptake of NBS in these other MEAs remains very, very scattered and uneven. And we see that terms like resilience, ecosystem services, and NCP, like nature contributions for people, are a lot more used. NBS appears not in every of these of the documents. The technical documents, they might cite it. And this has actually been changing since 2022, when we got this multilaterally agreed definition of nature-based solutions with UNEA 5. I guess that the use of the term has then been kind of like very much gone more mainstream. And as I said, the NetworkNature screening is you can check this, it's like more than 100 pages, and it's really looking at what happens in the European Commission in terms of NBS, but I do actually encourage your projects to do a very similar work looking at the global arena, trying to understand different policies around the world, where NBS has entry points and where is actually kind of like not being helped in any way. So the relevant ones, as I was saying, of course, nature-based solutions is very important in terms of land degradation neutrality, LDN. And in the climate adaptation and mitigation agendas. So I would say that these two other COPs are actually opening more entry points for NBS. I heard that the COP30 in Brazil is going to have a lot of sessions on NBS, more than ever before. And I feel that the desertification COP is still very much forgotten. A lot of people don't even know it exists, but it is a huge entry point for you doing work with nature-based solutions. UNCLOS and BB and G, so frameworks for marine and coastal biodiversity protection, everything related to ocean-based NBS, and of course making sure that governance goes beyond the national jurisdiction. Then, as was mentioned in one of the presentations before, sites, in terms of like, I guess this is one of them where we have to go very, very deep and make sure that NBS is not actually going against biodiversity. So it's very schizophrenic in a way, because biodiversity is at the heart of NBS. It's part of the definition. So if you're doing something and you're not helping biodiversity, you're not doing NBS, obviously. But the problem is we see a lot of time, that's why you have the IUCN global standard on NBS, and now we're putting up an NBS standardization for the European level together with SAN. And so we need metrics, because some things that are actually claimed to be NBS do harm biodiversity. And so in your research, it's very important to go into species and ecosystem-specific MEAs like CITES, CMS, and the Ramsar Convention. And here, some of the issues coming up is in terms of let's say the trade-offs that happened with human gains. So, for example, everything related to wetlands, you might have, you're doing your design for the wetlands that might be having floods, but they might be counterproductive for nature-based solution for biodiversity. So, you know, all the solutions that you're putting up, it's very important to do this very the stringent screening of what is happening there in terms of biodiversity. And this is not an MEA, but I think it's important to mention for you to be aware of it. It's the new urban agenda, so the SDGs. I highlighted here SDG 11. But of course, all 17 SDGs are related to nature-based solutions. In cities specifically, why I mentioned this one, because here, a lot of times there's hard critique on NBS, that if you have a green roof, you know, being designed in one of your buildings in the city, you're not really helping NBS in any way. You see, I use it interchangeably because for me, biodiversity is such the heart of NBS. But, you know, so it's even more important in urban ecosystems to look at that. And I think the nature restoration regulation at European level and the nature restoration plans will also help with metrics in that sense. These processes, they help shape implementation. So that's why it's important. It's not only a bunch of politicians, you know, going to the other side of the world to discuss and vote and be caught up in rooms until 4 in the morning in negotiations. It's really about driving implementations. So I think it's always important to do this this link, align research with GBF targets, but also in terms of like understanding the trade-offs and the co-benefits. So one of the main things with the MEAs here and the one for UNFCCC is, of course, a lot of times people have the carbon vision tunnel. So they're really, really focusing on, you know, how to lower the emissions, but then they're not really, you know, looking into how some of the solutions, you see a lot of red plus solutions that are actually harming biodiversity. So that kind of thing, that's why it's so important for our community to engage in these other MEAs. Of course, the whole discussion around environmental justice, against land grabbing, for safeguards, so that you can actually really bring the benefits to the people on the ground who are protecting biodiversity. So IPLCs, indigenous populations and local communities, this is a very, very important topic. In terms of NBS governance, collaborative governance schemes, and recognize that MEAs, they operate, of course, in all different levels. This one here, we're talking about the global level, but for us to be able to do a very good work at the global level, I think it's also important to engage in MEAs in also locally. I mean, as working for ICLE, the local government level is very important, I must highlight here, but also the regional level and also the national level. And I wanted to highlight here some opportunities for collaboration for you. also in terms the GBF, the CDB, but also in MEAs. So we have these two projects. I don't think we mentioned, I saw co-op for CBD, but I didn't see BioAgora being mentioned. So BioAgora is trying to make this link between policy and scientists. So a lot of times policymakers, they don't have answers to a question, so they can generate a prompt and the platform will connect their gap to scientists who can give the answer. RESPIN is also a project working very, very deeply. And of course, as we were saying here, the knowledge broker, EPES, I'm very happy that I was appointed last week for the European Commission as an expert to be able to bring nature-based solutions stronger to the EPES discussions, because nature-based solutions is still very niche in there in a way. So there has to be a lot more NBS discussions within EPES. And I know that Biodiversa Plus has very strong links with EPES, so I'm sure, and NetworkNature is also trying to promote, so we want to bring you researchers to these processes that you can bring your voice. Advice to researchers. I think it's very important for you when you do your work packages and your deliverables. Don't speak work package 3 did this, did that. Deliverable 7.1, or try to really engage with communication partners from your projects so that they can translate the languages and they can actually disseminate your results in a very tailored way for engaging with MEA audiences and of course CDB as well. Use policy relevant formats. So I heard many times last week when I was in a NetworkNature consortium meeting that from policymakers themselves, from the European Commission, they don't have a lot of time, which is weird, right? Because you have to read policies to be a policymaker. But for you to get their attention, try to work with briefs, with infographics, targeted visuals, time outputs with key events. So when you are doing an output, try to see when you disseminate it and look at the policy cycles so that you can, enter in the right moment and don't miss. For example, there's a big decision going to be made and then your output is only for 2 months later and you miss that great opportunity, to engage with MEAs. So don't do that. Try to see when things are coming out. Use the resources we have in the NetworkNature platform as much as you want. Our work package lead for policy is IEEP, and they're really doing great work. And effective science policy links, they help to shape what is happening on the ground. I think I also mentioned here some technical briefs. I just have 30 seconds. But maybe this with the events. Yeah, so these events are coming up. Engage with these events on the monitor. So the IUCN World Conservation Congress is happening this October. It's a place where all these things are going to be very much discussed. The UN Ocean Conference is coming also. Of course, COP in Brazil and Ramsar. And just to say, Yerevan, next year, 2026, it's going to be in Europe. This is a huge opportunity, right? So Biodiversa Plus has a biodiversity COP happening in Europe, very close to home, So I guess this is a big call for all of you to already this year start thinking about the sessions, about bringing your results and engaging and to be able to be there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so very much, Daniela, for this introduction. So, as you mentioned, MEAs are sometimes a bit forgotten when we're speaking about engagement with international frameworks. So thank you for bringing it to the stage. And thank you also for sticking to the schedule, which is very tight. So Pierre mentioned a few hours ago that COP4CBD is doing trainings 2-day trainings, so we're trying to do the same in 2 hours and a half, so thank you very much. So Biodiversa Plus can support you in engaging with other MEAs, so do other projects mentioned by Daniela, for example, NetworkNature, BioAgora, COP4CBD and Respin, so do not hesitate to reach out to us and to them. So we will now enter the third and last phase of this workshop. I hope you're still awake. So after understanding the CBD and other MEAs, as well as their opportunities for scientific engagement, the international policy landscape, as well as way it addressed NBS, the workshop will leave some room for peer learning to make it a bit more interactive. Namely, Biodiversa Plus funded researchers are already engaged in such international frameworks and will probably inspire you. We hope it will, or at least will give the opportunity to reflect on further engagement with the CBD. 2 BiodivNBS projects are considered pioneers, what we call pioneers in that regard, and the first one is called DEFENDBIO. So you will know more about the DEFENDBIO project tomorrow during the BiodivNBS kickoff meeting, but we would like to highlight their engagement, their proactiveness towards engagement with the CBD already. So I now give the floor to its coordinator, and PIs. So Dr. Ituarte-Lima, Dr. Liliana Lizarazo Rodriguez, and Dr. Ana Maria Vargas Fala. You're coming from 3 universities, from Sweden as well as Belgium. You're experienced in law, so from different perspectives, namely human rights and environmental law, and you're engaged in the DEFENDBIO project. So thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you for your inspiration.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So I have been engaged with the Convention of Biological Diversity for the last 15 years. And first in the very national level, then at the transnational level, supporting the Secretariat on developing the voluntary guidelines for safeguards in biodiversity financing mechanisms. And I must say, it has been a very exciting journey to go from the very local to the national and then to the global. But something that it did come across for me through this process is that while they are very important, there are certain challenges. For instance, when I was participating in the Nagoya COP, which was my first COP, the Aichi targets adopted, there was a lot of momentum, and yet when we see when the Aichi targets were assessed, for example, within the context of the Secretariat of the Convention of Biological Diversity Global Outlook 5, we realized that not a single one of them was fully complied with. So the challenge that we have ahead is how do we really work in terms of making this global biodiversity framework, the Kunming-Montreal, a reality? So that's a challenge that it's for all of us. And for all of us, whether we're lawyers, scientists, in terms of natural science, social science, and beyond. So we take a very comprehensive approach to all the global biodiversity targets. However, specifically, our entry point with this project is Target 22, which talks about specifically recognition of defenders working in biodiversity, specific issues, participation, respecting rights, cultures, and justice. And we do this also in terms of addressing, and our outreach strategy is very much linked to our key research question, which is how the biosphere defenders. Biosphere, we use it to overcome the divide between climate, biodiversity, pollution, so having this more integrated approach. So how defenders as agents of change including in these non-conventional forms of nature-based solutions, can contribute to transnational implementation on law and policy. So we see legal empowerment tools informed by the latest scientific findings as well as grounded efforts as key. And there we also see these Target 22 very much in connection to Target specifically relating to climate change, Target 8 and Target 11 that refers to nature-based solutions. So how do we do this? Well, we do this by 3 key entry points. Investigating how the biosphere defenders in practice use the law to enact change in the ground and make the Convention of Biological Diversity objectives a reality. We use by empowering both government officials to know what are those rights and right holders themselves to know how can they use the law to advance nature stewardship and biodiversity and these nature contributions to people, but also the intrinsic values of biodiversity. And finally, by contributing with knowledge and the latest science for this enabling environment for biosphere defenders. To scale up, when we're talking about what grounded efforts are working and how can they inform this international fora. So we're talking about not only law in books, of course we engage in legal interpretation and international public lawyers, but we're also interested in law in action. What actually happens in these COPs? How are different groups, including, for example, one of our advisory committee members is the coordinator of the CBD Women's Caucus. So we're interested in how this is important in terms of law in action at the international level, but we're also interested in scaling out. So how can countries learn from this integration of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment in their national strategies and action plans? And also in terms of scaling out, how can, for example, a country, our focus is on Latin America and the Caribbean and its interaction with Europe, learn from each other? And finally, living law, which we are talking about this everyday life in which people enjoy biodiversity and ecosystem services and engage in their stewardship. So very quickly, here we are just showcasing how the international and transnational dimension of our project and how these Target 22 and well as Target 23, I already mentioned the Target 8 and 11, but also other targets on mainstreaming, business responsibilities, and monitoring. So now I will pass over to Ana Maria, who will be explaining further our outreach strategy.
Thank you, Claudia. So I want to start by asking you a question. How many of you have attended one of these COP meetings, in the biodiversity in Cali last year, or the one in Azerbaijan, or you're planning to attend the one in Brazil? Raise your hand, don't be shy. I just want to get a rough idea. All right, for the rest of you that have not attended, I can give you a brief course. It's the craziest thing on earth, actually. So people are saying that in Brazil, in Belém, it's cheaper to actually buy an apartment than to rent the apartment for the 2 weeks of the climate COP. This is how crazy the COPs are. So we've been talking about COPs, but we need to be aware that this requires a lot of also learning. But I attended my first COP last year, and I really highly recommend it. And I want to say why we need to engage with the COPs in different ways, but how that goes back to what Claudia was saying about living law. COPs are really important events. They are policy makers. They, like these international agreements are not out of like one policy maker in New York or in Montreal or in Washington. They are actually all nations on earth. It's our presidents, our prime ministers go and represent, well, if we say that we are democracies, our citizens dare to bring these agreements. But they're really important. The problem is that many of our policymakers are representing national politics. And if I go to the place where I live, Sweden, the politics there, citizens are not worried about biodiversity, let's be honest. They are worried about the increase of cost of living. So we need to bring these concepts and these issues back to the citizens, back to the living law, so that our policymakers represent us. We need to be aware also that there is authoritarianism and democracy is in decline, even academic freedom is in decline. But we cannot just say, well, the world is so hard, COPs are crazy expensive, let's just sit at home and hope that something is going to happen. We need to engage at multiple levels, as Claudia was saying. So we're planning different engagements here at Global COPs, not only attending physically, but also online, it's possible. We work with partners. So if you're scared about these COPs, there are so many organizations, actually, that work and attend, and they save money and bring money from all over the places to send one delegate to that COP. So collaborate with them. We've been talking about national focal points. They're really important. We should, all of us, that's something easy, send an email to your national focal point and tell them about your project and what you're doing. But I want to end with this living law idea that we have and saying that, and I put this slide, beyond meetings. We need to think beyond meetings, and we need to talk about plural dialogues. If we want to enrich policy dialogue, it's not enough just to sending a policy brief. It's not enough to talk about this. We need to enhance dialogues.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just pass the slide. So we have also a dimension in the project that is, in fact, the transnational dimension, trying to see how actors cross the borders of multi-level governance. So how actors move from the local regulations towards the regional ones, how, for instance, EU law is having a very important impact in what is going on in Latin America. We have two main actions in that respect, one that connects with the role of companies leading value chains, and for that respect, we also aim at analyzing how biosphere defenders advance nature-based solutions in the framework of global value chain governance. This is, of course, a very typical case of transnationality. And the other side of this is how biosphere defenders deal with conflicts and what happens when biosphere defenders are trying to advance nature-based solutions. They do not find the solutions and they have to go to courts. So we are pretty much interested in looking at to what extent courts are enabling biosphere defenders to implement nature-based solutions, to what extent there is a interaction between human rights and the implementation of nature-based solutions that was already explained in the previous presentation. So we also connect with the multilateral environmental agreements and particularly the Convention on Biological Diversity, issues of corporate accountability, guiding principles on business and human rights, but also all the framework that connects with the protection of indigenous and Afro-Americans in general, particularly the declarations and also the ILO Convention of Indigenous Rights. Outreach, we plan to develop a website, but also multi-actor dialogues in Latin America, in Europe with the policymakers, and also in different types of fora that were already explained by Ana Maria. And then to conclude, because we only have 30 seconds, thank you very much. We also created a LinkedIn pagina, so you can just click on the QR code. And those are the partners universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Claudia, Ana Maria, and Liliana for presenting their project. And we are very happy to see that, despite the fact that we're at a very early stage of BiodivNBS projects being kicked off tomorrow, some projects are already foreseeing a strong engagement with CBD, and we really appreciate it. You will have the opportunity to ask some questions to them after the presentation of Dr. Marije Schaafsma. I hope I pronounce it well. So she's from the Free University of Amsterdam and in the Netherlands, and she will introduce the project she's coordinating as part of the BiodivNBS call, which is called FairNature. She's an ecological economist or environmental economist, and the floor is yours for a short introduction, followed by a Q&A. Thank you so much.
All right, good morning, everyone. I've always been told I should never call my university the Free University, but also because it's not free at all. Vrije Universiteit, thereby. So indeed, I'm the coordinator of FairNature. And the purpose of FairNature is to see how we can scale out, so implement nature-based solutions at a wide geographical scale in a fair and just manner. And I'm sorry that the previous speakers couldn't have a bit more time because I thought it was very engaging. What I also thought, and I believe that the sort of CBD and those processes at international level are really sort of core to your project. That is less so the case for us, but we do mention the CBD in our project proposal as one of the avenues for impact, one of the areas where we want to engage with. Now, after hearing about who's an expert and who is advanced and who's a beginner, I'm at best a naive beginner. Naive advanced, I think, hopefully. But my deputy PI, who unfortunately can't be here today, Ina Lehmann, she is really an expert and working a lot on the CBD and really seeing how the CBD engages with the topic of environmental justice. Now, I think when we hear the topic of environmental justice, many people think about IPLCs, the Global South, etc. In our FairNature project, we actually only have case studies in Europe, where environmental justice is also a very important issue. But it manifests itself in different ways. And through the 6 cases that we have in the Biodiversa, in our Biodiversa project, we are going to look at how environmental justice plays out and how it should be addressed when we're scaling out nature-based solutions. So in our proposal we wrote, we would love to organize or co-organize a side event at one of the COPs. We thought that the one in 2026 would probably be too ambitious, so we're aiming for 2028. And really looking here for people who would like to collaborate with us on that. But we really identified in the proposal that, yes, it would be good to find an organization who can help, or who we can partner up with. Ina, as I said, is really an expert on the CBD. She is the deputy PI, as I said, but regularly attends these COP meetings, has a wide network in the CBD, but she's also part of the Academia and Research Caucus. And this is a group, I believe, they sort of started again, or they were a bit dormant for a while, but in 2022 started again, sort of convening. She was in a meeting with them yesterday to make sure that science-based outputs and evidence feeds into the CBD process. So that, I think, is another route, another platform where we want to engage. Another route towards that process we saw was through the Dutch Environmental Agency, Dutch Environmental Planning Agency, or PBL. That agency is often represented at negotiations, and our university has a long-standing collaboration with them. So that's another opportunity for us to sort of see how we can feed the results of FairNature into that process. What we also identified, I guess, is that we would love to collaborate more. So all the hands that have reached out this morning, we would love to shake hands with you and see how we can collaborate with the Secretariat. We also understand, however, and I think all our projects should realize that, what is the capacity that we have in order to engage with those processes? How much can we really afford? And also for the CBD Secretariat, because also their capacity can be limited. So those are sort of considerations that we're currently working with. And that is really all I can say at the moment about FairNature. We've only just started. We are happy that we signed this consortium agreement, so that's where we stand at the moment. And I think that may hold for many of you, but it's a journey that we're going to take together over the next 3 years. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you really much. Any question regarding these two presentations? And also the Daniela presentation.
No, it's a fairly general question, actually. There's this word engagement is being used a lot. What do you actually mean? So from our point of view of running a biodiversa project, you can engage with the CBD through your national focal point. You mean we feed in our results and we hope they're bumped up, or is there a two-way process? We say, we've got this brilliant idea, give us money, which is my preferred option. I mean, what do we mean by engagement here? So it's not practically clear what all this talk of engaging with the CBD means.
Thank you very much for the question, which is very relevant. So in my presentation, I tried to showcase some ways to engage. So these are multiple. And usually that's true, it's costly and you don't have resources to do this. So it's more like part of your dissemination work to engage with the CBD. I know in France, for example, we have the French Foundation on Biological Diversity, FRB, so the coordinator of the Biodiversa Plus partnership, and they are funded by the Ministry for Environment, the French ministry, to provide some scientific advice to the negotiators. So sometimes there are some agreements at the national level providing financial resources to engage, as we call it in this workshop, with the CBD. And usually you don't have such resources and agreements.
I didn't really understand. So it's both us feeding our results up and also looking for opportunities for them to support us.
Yes.
That's basically, you mean both of those.
Yeah. You can have the two-way relationships, but mostly researchers are engaging with CBD actors, but yeah, as mentioned by Marije, sometimes the CBD Secretariat is lacking resources to engage with you, so you need to be, as Tristan Tyrrell mentioned proactive and not shy, because they need us, we need them, but yeah, it's difficult. It's a challenging journey. And Claudia has a response to you.
Yeah, in response to that question, when I started publishing my academic articles on international peer-reviewed journals, I was keen to see, okay, what is the impact factor? And then I compared different journals and so on. And then I started realizing, well, it doesn't really happen. Like, what's the next step? So that was when it's not only a matter of translation of language, which is of course critical, depending on which countries you're working with, translating to different languages, but also in terms of once you put blood, sweat, and tears in that academic paper to be published, it takes relatively little time as compared to that. On translating it to a language, short, understandable for policymakers, if your target group is policymakers, or to Indigenous people and local communities, if that's your target group. So I could really encourage in terms of your outputs, because of course, if you want to do an enormous outreach strategy, it takes a lot of money and time. But often, just with the resources you have, it's enough to at least start the process going.
Thank you very much. So, Daniela.
Yeah, just on that, as I mentioned, NetworkNature was able to bring some projects to COP, but that doesn't mean that we are a 6 million project, we're a poor project compared to others, but we were able to collect, interesting papers or outputs or policy briefs and have people that were at COP presenting them in the EU pavilion, for example. And then you have a pavilion for every of these, 196 countries. So you can actually use these sessions in the pavilions to actually expose some of these decision makers who are there, to this content. You can also do, let's say, a white paper, and then you can, spread them in the, in the breaks. You can engage in conversations with them. So I think going to COP, even if not everybody can go there because of the clear resource problem, you can still get people going to be your vessel for your research and your outputs. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your enlightenment on how to get engaged within CBD and MEAs, knowing that we are still at the early stage of the project. We are now pleased to welcome online Mrs. Christina Hvilsom, who is a geneticist at Copenhagen Zoo, and she is also a member of the IUCN Conservation Genetics Specialist Group. She will today intervene as a funded researcher involved in international process, currently conducting a project, so the GINAMO project, under Biodiversa Plus on nature monitoring, and yes, provide us key feedbacks on her experience. So Christina, the floor is yours.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and thank you for sticking around, all of you, to hear this final presentation of today's first session. There you go. You should be able to see my slides now. That I take as a yes. Okay, so I have a lot on my heart today, and I will try to be concise. There will be an email in the end for me if you have any additional questions that you would like to ask. I'm happy to tell more about what we've done over the years. So in essence, our Biodiversa Plus project, GINAMO, is a large transnational EU Biodiversa Plus funded project, like yourself, with the project you're engaged in. And it has a diverse team from social scientists to geneticists. And it's based on the need to report on the genetic indicators to the Convention on Biological Diversity, so the CBD. So if you boil GINAMO down, the mission is to co-create user-friendly workflows with country stakeholders, enabling them to report on the CBD, Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, genetic diversity indicators. So what that looks like, if you ask ChatGPT, is something like this. So a scientist from Biodiversa Plus project engaging with a lot of stakeholders, talking about genetic diversity as a component of biodiversity. So our history in terms of engaging with CBD and other MEAs as well is long. Some of us are more than longer than others. So I have based my presentation on kind of an overview, a timeline. So first, in the early days of genetics and conservation policy and management, actually goes back to the mid-70s. And then it went into the CBD in '93, and also the Habitats Directive of the EU, which was also mentioned by Pierre earlier today. And then later on, it also went into the Aichi targets of the CBD and into ENGEES, and also IUCN launched its Conservation Genetic Specialist Group in 2014. Then from 16 to 21, a lot of things happened. There were different research networks that grew, and also the first EU cost action network on genetic diversity was launched, called GBIKE, and that really helped kind of promote the importance of genetic diversity in biodiversity. But there was also quite a frustration growing in the research community because there was a lack of genetic diversity for wild species in the CBD. So several research articles went out in 19 and 20 addressing that need. But from 2020 and towards 2022, besides the research articles addressing the gap in genetic diversity for wild species, we also produced a lot of knowledge generation on genetic diversity and what potential indicators could look like. We examined genetic diversity in 57 countries. We held webinars. We attended open-ended working group meetings, and also prepared or proposed and named the genetic diversity indicators. In 2021, we then had comments from the parties on the indicators. Although the majority was positive, there were also several comments requesting more guidance. So in 2022, we attended the COP15, where the genetic diversity indicators was proposed. And hooray, the genetic diversity indicators actually went into the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So all of that was fantastic, but we also knew that we had a lot of work ahead of us because we needed to respond to all the comments from the parties requesting more guidance. And that actually led to the proposal for GINAMO, which was fortunately granted, where it's all about helping to provide more guidance. We then also attended the COP16 last year, where GINAMO was one of the organizers of both the booth, and we were also at several side events, etc. Like you just heard, being present at multiple places and getting the key messages out was really important. From 2022 to 24, we've held a lot of different webinars again. We have also provided input statements to SAPSTA, which you heard about earlier today from Pierre as well. We have further fine-tuned the methodology. We have explored advantages, disadvantages. So in summary, we've done a lot of outreach. We have collaborated quite broadly, and we've responded to requests from parties. We have also submitted comments to GBF drafts, to SAPSTA, etc. We have drafted policy briefs. We have, and then we've held, attended both COP15 and COP16 and engaged with delegates as well. So where are we now? Well, we have, fortunately, we know that GINAMO is a 3-year project, so it's limited. And we knew that in order to really provide a broad uptake and use of the genetic diversity indicators of the CBD, we needed more people. We needed a big, even bigger network to enable that. So we applied for an EU cost action network, which was fortunately also granted, called GENOA, Genetic Nature Observation and Action, which again will help amplify the work that we do in GINAMO. We have also drafted an IUCN motion on genetic diversity, which we just received news 2 weeks ago that it was accepted. So crossing fingers that it will be seen positively and become a resolution for IUCN to work towards. And then we will continue our work both in GINAMO and also beyond GINAMO in Genoa, together with countries providing input to their MEAs apps and also helping, offering our help in terms of reporting and using the genetic diversity of the CBD. So what have we learned? We've learned a lot, but trying to summarize it is find leverage points, identify your key people, be persistent, do a lot of outreach. So both webinars, policy briefs, emails, and have personal connections. It's really important to have those. And listen to what others say. Don't assume that you know what others think and may need, but listen to what they have to say and address their concerns. Sometimes it's important also to be mindful of a language barrier as well. So if you can translate things into language that your stakeholders use, then do that. And also offer capacity building. So make clear that you're forming partnerships. It will require a lot of partners, and that's really important. Do not go alone. And be prepared to invest significant time and money. The final thoughts from me today is that you can engage with and impact policy. Be proactive, and I'm sure you will succeed. But where to invest your time? Engage with end users from the beginning is key. Create policy-relevant research products. Reply to policy requests for expert input, and disseminate your knowledge widely and use multiple avenues. Again, a lot of stakeholders, especially in the top level stakeholders, they don't have time to read research papers. So it's really important that you offer other opportunities like webinars, like policy briefs, etc. Train others to be conversant in policy is also really key. So my takeaway message for you today is that the work that we've done in GINAMO and also before the life of GINAMO has only been possible through collaboration to the second. It is a huge team effort. But the team then helps identify opportunities. It brings together many different skills, which you will need. And it helps you amplify voices and provide expert input to policy. I think that was my last words for today, and thank you for listening.
Thank you really much, Christina, for your key advice, and I think it was really interesting for all of us to see all the international processes you're involved in. Do we have any questions in the room? Okay.
Thank you. It's just a quick question, but a couple of people have referred to it already. What is a policy brief, and how does one write it or compose it?
I'm glad you asked. So Biodiversa Plus also does policy briefs. So there's also resources within Biodiversa that can help. But a policy brief is, in essence, kind of, if you have, for instance, a research article that you want to convey the main findings of that research research article, and make it relevant towards your stakeholder, your audience, so to say. And so it's basically a boil down in more layman's term of your key findings of a research article and their relevance. So that's, in essence, a policy brief. So it's easily digestible, normally a 1-pager, 2-pager max. So it's something that people that have limited time can easily get an understanding of what results and messages you have. So we've really had a lot of positive feedback on the policy briefs that we've done from policymakers, saying that it helped a lot. Because I know that genetic diversity is often seen as quite complex. So helping to kind of boil it down and digest it for people really helps them understand and then uptake as well.
Thank you very much, Christina. Yeah, other questions?
Just a quick word on the policy briefs. There are quite a few examples out in the hall of policy briefs that we have. And we're in fact trying more and more not to have a policy brief for projects, but to combine different projects in policy briefs so you get more broadly supported recommendations overall. So that is something we'd recommend if you see other projects that are similar in your field or are working on the same kind of thing. If you can combine the results and we have support to write policy briefs, then I think for everybody that would be more interesting overall. Thanks. Yeah, just outside. I thought that's what I said, but yeah, just outside in the hall.
Thank you, Ron. Other questions? Yeah, maybe.
Well, thank you. It's me again. So you recommended to engage with end user from the very beginning. Is it necessary to develop networks beforehand?
No, not necessarily. You have to start somewhere, right? So, but it's, again, it's really sitting on one side, we can have assumptions on what other people and groups need and think, but not really before you've engaged with people and understand what their true needs are. Can you address those? So you don't need to have a large network to do it, but of course not. But engage with the end users from the beginning is key. And then you can go from there.
Many thanks again for your advice. I think these would be very useful to BiodivNBS projects. Thank you so much. And now we will need to conclude this workshop, and Rob Hendriks will present the next steps, the follow-up, and finally the opportunities to get support from Biodiversa Plus to engage with CBD and MEAs, because as mentioned in the introduction, we are here to know if projects are willing to engage and how we can support them in this journey, starting today until 2028, the end of the BiodivNBS projects.
Thank you. I will try to be quick and brief because it has been a long morning already. So some concluding words. I'll start off with sort of reminders type of housekeeping. First, the recording of this session will be made available, and that is helpful to those that are not able to attend here, but also probably for some of us to be watching back and to grasp all the details that have been so eminent in this fully packed morning. Then there has been already a reference to the survey that is going to be sent out, and you're all requested to actively use that and work with that. Then there's the third element here, that there will be a guide presented in October, and it is yet another element of the cooperation between Biodiversa Plus and Co-op for CBD. And all of the aspects that were coming across this morning will be in that as well. Then there are some next steps in the context of this particular work stream of Biodiversa. So as mentioned, we will be further developing the strategy to work with the implementation of the GBF and support it. There is here the reminder of the side events that have been mentioned in the presentations as well. And there will be a specific follow-up capacity building workshop similar to this one relating to the BiodivMBS products. But I'm not really sure whether it'll be an online one or yeah, that's an online one. Yeah, and then here is the fact sheets and grabbing the information in a written form again. So that is also something going on. Then there will be some elements as part of the stakeholder engagement work stream, and I was. Yeah, you move places. I was going to hand over to Julien Pelet to briefly touch upon that.
Thank you very much, Rob. So I'm Julien Pelet. I'm Stakeholder Engagement Officer of Biodiversa Plus, and we will have occasion to discuss more during the week. And I'm taking the occasion to make the link with the clustering workshop that we will have on Thursday and start to introduce you to further resources and activities we'll be doing with you on Thursday and afterwards. So clustering workshop on Thursday, we will touch upon also stakeholder engagement and what it means with engagement. And we will talk also about the science policy interface and other concrete outcomes from the online workshop that we had on the 6th of March. There will be a science policy interface training in the coming months for you. This will be online to follow up a bit, and it will focus also on the impact of the projects regarding science policy interface and stakeholder engagement. And there is the update of the guide on policy relevance for research that is also upcoming. So we will update in this document the landscape, the policy landscape. It's quite evolving. We've seen this morning, and also the impact of projects within the landscape and on policy. And I think that's the main thing. And as Ron mentioned, there is the tables outside. There's some policy guides are also outside for consultation, and you will all receive a stakeholder engagement handbook as well. And in this document, there are concrete tools and resources for how to engage, what it means, and so on. And on COP for CBD, I will hand over to you.
I will take over again. With Pierre, I agreed that I would present these few points since he was already standing here and you know him, but please reach out to Pierre. And also I was told that Constance would be in the room as well. Constance, if you're here, please wave. But I don't see. Then, well, the messages from the Co-op for CBD side, there will be expert consultations going on this springtime. Then there will be a CBD-related traditional ecological knowledge workshop in June, which I was told it will be in Trondheim, Norway. And there is many more resources on the Co-op for CBD website, and there's also a newsletter by them, and the QR code here is pointing towards that. And it is not working. Okay, well, then the words reach out to Pierre really apply here. So that's why we are here in physical terms, please. We will follow up, and the colleagues from Co-op for CBD for sure will follow up on that. Then, timeline. This is the closing of this very long session. It is an indication of what will be going on towards 2090, 2030 more or less, so the period of the GBF. There's a number of steps indicated here in the blue, or black, whatever, related to the CBD timeline. So that is all related to the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, the whole process of the global analysis of what will be going on. And that is very much related to the indicators. So there's a lot of opportunities that we all touched upon this morning for you to engage, and your projects on this timeline do more or less coincide with this important timeline. And in green, there is the major steps by Biodiversa Plus. what I would like to end off with is that there's a lot of information shared, and it is really relevant to know all this and to be able to connect. But in the end, it is the inspiration that counts, and I hope truly that this event helped to get some of that intrinsic motivation, some of the testimonies, to me at least, really adhere to that. But because we can all participate in different manners and levels, and different levels of intensity and related to different levels of resources. But in the end, it is all about our compassion to be able to do so. And you obviously are not here unless that you are having a true compassion with science. That's clear. That's why these eminent projects have been selected. But also the compassion is what is needed. The love for nature and people is what we needed to connect that to make the further impact in society. So really, again, thanks to all for being here. I would like to invite all of us to have a round of applause for all the contributions this morning.